Hello, 19. I know, I've had quick changes all day. I've had quick changes.
That's pretty observant.
They're all African up.
Right. But I was on there for about 5 minutes today.
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. So we ended up in the park. I'm going to start with the roll call. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome. I hope you feel welcome. I'm going to start with the roll call. Dr. Mott.
Here.
Deborah Alsop, I'm here. Terry England. Here. Anthony Hobson.
Yes.
Terry's not here. Micah.
Here.
Cameras. Toylin O'Neill. Here. Dr. Odell Owens.
Present.
And Laura Sandra here. And we have a quorum. Others may join us, but I will move on to the agenda. The approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the agenda? I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
So moved.
A motion by Dr. Owens. I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Laura Sandra. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, next we have the review of our June 13th, 2019 minutes. Comments? Questions? I had one comment I can't resist. Sorry.
The meeting would not be.
Even from the chair. On page 3 of the minutes, under number 6, update on search for permanent executive director, I believe Terry England is on the search committee. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so we need to add Terry England as a member of the search committee. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes with that correction. Thank you, Dr. Mott. Second. Second, Terry England. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, moving through the agenda is the time in which we entertain comments from the public. Do we have anyone signed up?
No one has signed up for any.
Does anyone from the public want to sign up real quickly or make comments? Going once, twice, 3 times? Okay, moving on to number 4, overview of metrics work. And we have with us today Rob McDaniel. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, good afternoon. I think
Yes, let me ask Sally to do an introduction of you and of this presentation.
And many of you, most of you have met Rob before. Metrics is the organization that does the eligibility determination, works with providers, getting them into the QI process, and in many ways tracking and maintaining a gazillion points of data for the Cincinnati Preschool Promise. They are our partner. They have 3 staff members here in Cincinnati, and Rob and Emma oversees our project. Rob is the president, CEO of Metrics, and has, I know he'll tell you a little bit about the company, but mostly I wanted you to know the kind of data and information that Metrics provides us and tracks so that we all have a better understanding of sort of what is possible in terms of our information, a little bit about the work that Metrics does for us. So I am glad that you're here and can tell us a little bit about the kind of the great things that Metrics does for the Preschool Promise.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you for the great weather for this short trip. It's beautiful outside. Appreciate that. As Sally said, we are the enrollment and eligibility and back office provider for you all. Today I thought I could go over a little bit of the system and the data, just like Sally said. My company, we're a small company, DB certified, about 15 people. Here, our office in Cincinnati, we're headquartered in Denver. We're focused on education, primarily early childhood education, but expanding into some post-secondary work in Denver with some scholarship programs that are going through that office. We've worked in about half a dozen states. Currently, we're working with the state of Nevada on looking at their statewide early childhood education program. We've done work in Nashville, just wrapped up a contract with the Nashville United Way, looking at a enrollment broker type of program for the greater Nashville area. St. Paul, we did some work up there helping enable their initiatives similar to Cincinnati. Cincinnati always comes up in those conversations, as does Denver. What's Cincinnati doing? What's Denver doing? What's Dayton doing? In Dayton, we built a similar system to what you all use to track all the enrollment eligibility in students. Please jump in at any part of this conversation, ask any questions you'd like. The handout that you have in front of you is our standard monthly report. The most recent one, I think it's June in front of you there. And you can see really the quality of data and the richness of the data we have. And that really is the basis for us as a company. We believe in cost-effective data solutions that are robust enough to report on any elements of the program and scalable enough to support things, not just what you're doing today, but what you might be doing tomorrow. Up on the screen there, you'll see kind of the three pillars, as we call them, of the system. I think Cincinnati was, in the preschool promise, was very forward-thinking in investing in the system up front. That system, the pillars of that system are student and family data, the provider data, and the payments data that goes through tuition assistance. We are able, by the way the system is set up, to respond easily to data requests from staff, from the community, from the board, all the constituent groups. We can develop answers and customize reporting very quickly with a high degree of confidence that the data is accurate. It's a one-stop repository for all of your data. CPP has approved a largely paperless function for how we do things, so everything is scanned into the system as it comes in, paper, anything like that. We attach it to either provider or student records or payment records, so it's all available for future use, but there's not files running around, anything like that. Very, very secure, closed loop environment. And finally, the data is secure, accurate, and scalable. With those three building blocks that are interlinked within the system, you really have a scalable solution that can support many, many initiatives down the road. We've just been working with Hector on getting all the insurance elements set up so that those payments can be captured and tracked for those providers that are using the insurance program that's been talked about here. Just quickly, I wanted to highlight a few slides that are in the report to just give you a flavor for the data.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Please, Pastor Tate.
Can you unpack what you just said about the insurance piece? What is your role in that process?
We are simply helping track the payments that are helping helping the providers pay for the insurance premiums through that's been approved through this board. So we're just making sure that the numbers are getting captured.
The other piece that you do is that when a provider applies to be in the quality improvement program, metrics is the place where all the forms, all the information is sent. So they also track what's missing, what pieces are needed in order to move forward with the insurance payments and anything else that is needed. So they're the keepers of and gatherers of the required documents as well.
So all of the providers that we have in the queue that are waiting, it starts with you, right? You're looking at, if there's anything missing, then you are the group, the organization that kind of checks and polices that. And when everything
Sure, we work with staff to say, here's what we have, here's what we don't have, and we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Okay.
Show you a couple screenshots on it. So Student Insights, this to me is a really interesting report. It's actually not as linear as you'd expect from a January to December. You'll see it goes from April to May. And what it is on a month-by-month basis, the approval trend for the past 3 years. Great example of where things have been, very interesting with the blue highlighting our first year of operation, where it was hurry up and get everyone in as quickly as we can and hair on fire, get folks enrolled. And you see that kind of coming through in September. And then last year, you really see that backing up to a large enrollment in August. And then this coming year, for the 18-19 school year, 19-20 school year, you'll notice that really in April, we're seeing April, May, and June, we're seeing materially more applications coming through than we have in prior years. To me, that tells us that people are learning about the program, people are excited to get their kids in and getting things moving quicker than they have in prior years. So just a quick snapshot of the kind of data we can report on. Every one of these data elements, you can drill down into it, to the student level, to the provider level, so on and so forth. Find those applications, see what's been submitted, what schools are they going to, so on and so forth. Demographic details, we have 2,277 students and counting. So that's a really exciting number. We hope to see that get past 3,000. We'll see how that goes. Every application, 100% quality control. So essentially our team, part of the service that we provide for you, is not only processing it, but a high level of quality control. So every application is essentially worked twice to make sure that it's accurate and correct for all the details. Some of the things, and you'll see this across a couple of the slides, what can it do in the long run? You know, here's what we're doing today, we're tracking this stuff. Well, so the platform is in its nature a CRM. So things about the scalability to support current and prospective family communications. We have emails, we have phone numbers. You all have asked for consent to talk to those people. So it really offers the marketing and communications elements down the road to do more and more of that capture. Next slide, please. Again, another just snapshot of student insights. This is from chart 3 on page 12 of the report that's in front of you. Here you'll see all of the enrollment by year and by school. I know it's teeny tiny. You guys have quite a few schools enrolled in CPP. So you can see, again, year by year enrollments left to right at all the various providers you have. And what this is, again, it's linked to the providers. You can really get that cross-tabulation of what students are at what schools, and not only just the schools, but also what sites they're at. So all of this information is cross-tabulable. I think that's a word, to put this stuff together and look at it through different views of the cube. Week to week, month to month, year to year, those applications, we can trend them across any way that is useful to CPP and anyone and the constituents of the organization. Again, in these sorts of things, we have the ability to scale up, to really put these demographics of these providers against neighborhoods, against particular areas of the city, against potential food deserts, against quality deserts, all those kinds of things to really start targeting high-need neighborhoods if that's a direction the organization wants to go. We know everything from the application in a reportable and data-driven way where we can really get at what's going on in the specific neighborhood of Cincinnati. So that's really some of the uses of this data. Any questions?
Do we have to prompt you in order to generate suggestions or recommendations from your experience?
We typically have not done a lot of advisory work. I think Sally and I have discussions, Jen and Evan have discussions, Hector, Lauren, Brittany, Flo. There's a lot of ongoing discussion. We don't do specific insight-driven reporting where we actually develop all the recommendations for you. But it's certainly work we could look at in the future, but we have not to date made those sorts of recommendations. We view our role as supporting the organization, supporting CPP's staff and leadership, and providing them all the information to make those decisions. But we definitely don't drive those sorts of things.
So with the data that you're capturing for us and similar data in other cities, are there any intersections, cross-referencing?
Absolutely not. It's your data. We're very careful. Everything has its own.
No, I'm just saying, when you see looking at their data, looking at our data, do you see some things that are happening in those cities as what's happening here? Like, for instance, the number of 3-year-olds that we're missing an opportunity there. If the same thing is happening in Denver or another city,
Denver doesn't do 3-year-olds right
Okay.
now. And we have been very careful. In terms of how we're evolving as a company, it's a conversation we'd love to have to start building up that library together
Okay.
and really draw some relationships. But we're we're more focused on security and privacy than the insights at our evolution as a company. So everything's its own server, its own environment. So we haven't asked you for permission to do that kind of work yet. Anecdotally, the programs are pretty different, and the cities are pretty different. So it's the conclusions. It'd be a really interesting exercise, but we've not done it today.
Do we, Rob, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Do we own our own data?
Of course. And then you own so the system, just a little background there, it's based on Sugar CRM, which is the little brother to Salesforce, and also less expensive, which is a nice feature of it. The custom coding, the custom modules, all that is yours. It was developed with your dollars, and the intellectual property belongs to you. We very much run it on your behalf. And of course, the data is on yours.
How's it secured?
So it's a closed loop environment. We don't have any open access outside of our network. And the licenses we have 10 licenses that support this
So
program.
you don't have any third-party vendors? that you work
Absolutely
with?
not. No, we don't have anybody out from the outside putting data in. We also have our essential third layer is what we would call secure MAC ID. So we have a clean list for all of the different IPs and MAC addresses we're going to use for all our machines. So even if you were to get somebody's password and login, you would not be able to get in unless you were on one of our machines that's been whitelisted. So it's as secure an environment as we can develop. We tend to have these conversations. Early on, people want to open up, let's do a big web and everyone can log in. And it's always a trade-off between security and CPP, I think wisely is chosen to have a very closed loop environment. Moving on to providers, thank you very much. So Pastor Tate, to your question, this chart's on page 26, chart 26 on page, one of the charts on pages 38 through 42. So this is pending QI provider detail. I blacked it out just to preserve some confidentiality here. But what's blacked out there are names of providers, and those are some of the elements we're missing from those particular providers, just as an example of the work we do and the data we're tracking, to Sally's point earlier, to help drive the trending and the specific issues and barriers to getting folks in. So we're tracking the entire provider lifecycle, including dates and timestamps, so that we know, okay, here's how long it took to get someone from their first application all the way into quality and/or tuition assistance. 278 provider applications have been processed. Everything's logged into the system regarding those applications, both approved and not approved. Again, the aggregation analysis, these are all things that we can look at. These little elements you see just in this little report, we can summate how many teacher credentials we're missing. We can sum who's missing W-9s, all those kinds of things to develop. Boy, people really have trouble with, and I don't know this to be true, but as an example, missing teacher credentials seems to be a real problem. How can we work that specific element? Some of the insights that your data offers you. We talked about time stamping, proactive communications on PFCC. Flo knows this all too well. She works closely with our team on really trying to stay on top of the PFCC expirations because it has such an impact on the program. And then finally, again,
just publicly funded childcare, that would be Hamilton County Department of Job and Family Services, and the public, what people think of as vouchers. That's what PFCC is, just explaining what those initiatives are.
And then finally, again, capacity, classroom data. These are things that the system could be expanded to do if you really wanted to start tracking stuff at a site capacity level, a classroom level, and then as you get more and more into teachers and wages, how do those things all start working together? Not something we're doing today, but certainly the system lends itself to that kind of tracking, that kind of cross-tabulation. What teachers got wages? What were the kids that were in those classrooms that got the wage subsidy? How did that turn out in third grade? Those kinds of things become really powerful. I know you're talking evaluation later, so I think that's a big component. Some of the things you can look at.
Are you currently tracking students leaving one center going to another?
We have that information, so you could see the kids hopping. Assuming that the other center
Yes.
is a CPP center, if it was in outside of the city or something like that, we wouldn't know where they went. But to the extent they re-enroll when they switch centers, we would. track that. We would have that information. Okay, so the provider quality ratings, same idea here. You can see the different ratings, what we're doing around step up to quality, all that's in here, longitudinally. How are these changing, both quality and tuition assistance? How are these things changing over time? All of the reporting, this is a snapshot from page 30, chart 20, talks about that scalability, or excuse me, the longitudinal changes over time of your providers and where they are and step up to quality. QI payments made to providers, again, that's something that easily the system could track if you wanted to. Payment insights, so this is a similar report talking about all of the dollars distributed year over year by month on the tuition assistance side of things, on a per student basis, per month basis, inclusive of adjustments. Really important that we talk about the adjustments. How long are kids in? What is the treatment model? Become really important evaluation elements. I think we tend to talk about how many kids are enrolled, how many were approved, how many applied. But how long were they in becomes some of the big indicators over time of how well these kids do in the long run. So knowing not that a kid was in for 9 months versus 6 months versus 2 months, and to Pastor Tate's point, how many schools did they jump around from? All these things start to paint a picture of success in the long run. And your data is set up in a way where you can really get into that with your evaluators here. We talk about attendance records, so we capture all those in the system, so there's a complete audit history. If your auditors or other auditors wanted to come in and look at the data, you could very much go all the way to the source information, which is the attendance sheet submitted by the providers to my team here in Cincinnati on how this is all processed. So complete audit records available in one place. It's great for transparency. It's great when you're a steward of public dollars to be able to have that level of accuracy and transparency to show that the dollars are doing what they're supposed to be doing and that the people that are supposed to be benefiting from those dollars are the ones in fact benefiting from it.
So I always have a question, I guess, because a lot of this is great information, and I'm hoping that we continue to maximize it. When students or families lose vouchers, and because we do the last dollar in, are we using this information, are we tracking when they increase in the amount of TA that they're getting because of the loss of vouchers?
My understanding is yes. Flo, I think you could probably know better than me.
We do, and so what we ask providers to do is provide us an update of the current voucher, because that's the only way that we know, with the exception of what we have in the computer. And so when we get the voucher, it's already put in what the expiration date is, but the goal is for the provider to give us the update so we can know if we do need to click in, pay full amount, or if the co-payment changes for the family, if we have to have an additional amount added on to that or decrease an amount. And once that's done, I mean, we automatically go into it. The hardest part of this is making sure that the providers give us the information. Some of them are better than the other, but we're very lenient in working with them once we notice that a child has lost their vouchers. But in the benefit of CPP, because we are still a business, we have put some time frames in a manner of saying, this is how long it's needed before we get the updated paperwork from you. But we go out our way to make sure, meaning we contact the family and the provider saying, hey, we need this paperwork. It's okay if you're not going to get PFCC. Because sometimes the parents have things going on with Hamilton County that they may not necessarily want to share with us. Maybe they've been sanctioned, maybe, you know, whatever it is. So all we want them to do is tell us where they stand with PFC. Sometimes we do ask proof, because what we have found out is that some parents, once this program started, were very reluctant to go down to Job and Family Services. Some of them simply just did not want to go. Wasn't because they didn't qualify for the benefits, but it's simply because some of them were kind of like, well, why would I have to go down there if I have you all doing that? And so sometimes it's beneficial to the family, but not necessarily to the center. The one thing that I've learned since I came here is coming in the door, I was family. It has to be even, Stephen, because our providers, we still kind of want to make sure, you know, that we look out for them as well and stuff. So we work with both parties.
Yeah, and that's, I referenced it earlier, I just mentioned it. All these dates are tracked when things expire. So we're able to actually have a log that can be generated on when expirations are coming up, working with staff to really help those folks match the dollars to the benefits.
I hope we also use it proactively. We work with Poverty Collaborative. There are a lot of families who are starting to see an increase in their wages. And once it happens, there's an adjustment to their vouchers. And so we'll see the impact of that on the TA side. And to Flo's point, when it happens, I guess I would love for us to be proactive as well. All right, thank you for that.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Another thing is, you know, that Flo alluded to is sometimes the parents don't share information with us. Okay, so if we see that their voucher has expired and I send Brandy a list of expired PFCCs, then I might ask them, but they may not tell me the truth.
Right.
You know, so I will call Flo and say, you know, this parent may be having some problems, you know, if maybe you can talk to her and see, because she may not want to share that with me. So then we'll wait a while. And sometimes they even, I'm sure there's the case with other centers, they will come without us being paid at all, either from Hamilton County or from Preschool Promise, just to make sure that the children are safe.
Thank you. And lastly, can we go back one? Sorry. Just on funding formulas, to some of the points that have been brought up, this system that we built for you guys is really flexible in that when you adjust the max amount, when other public funding changes happen, when there's anything around, oh, we want to do more around tuition or add 3-year-olds, the system can adapt quickly to that. We're able to implement those changes pretty quickly. So those are the scalability to give you all as a decision-making board as well as staff the ability to adjust as data come in and the situation on the ground changes. We're able to implement those pretty quickly. Thank you. And then the last one, just about transparency. To note, this is a report again. The students' names are blacked out for obvious reasons. But you'll see on the right, these are reports that are provided to every single CPP tuition assistance provider on a monthly basis. So they can see every child that's on the left there, again, it's blacked out. Reasons for what they were paid or weren't. You can see a kid about 2/3 of the way down had a late start date, so there was a prorated adjustment to that payment, so that the provider absolutely can match our records to their bank statements and their ultimate invoices and pay files for the families as well, so that they know exactly why they're getting a specific amount in a specific month. This is the report that they see. It's automated, it hits everybody right after the payments drop on a monthly basis. And we've had, through thanks to good high quality work by my team and the collaboration with CPP, we haven't missed a payment since we started going on 2 years and change now, so that's exciting for us.
Another thing, I like the way that you all send out when there is a new parent that has been enrolled in CPP. You send us a letter and you let us know exactly how much that parent, that family is going to either have to pay or that we're going to be receiving from CPP. So that kind of makes it where this is coinciding with the information that you're sending us about the new.
We copy essentially the providers on the student, the congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Your son has been accepted.
And if I could just jump in, Ms. Terry, right now what we're working on is because we have such a change in tier from 200 to 250, from 250 to 300, it's specifically spelled out for the parents, and so they can know, because what I recently learned is that you all cannot charge the parent less than what you charge the state. And so we're working to tailor all of the letters to the parents to say, you're going to receive 50%, you can expect the remaining balance of blah, blah, blah. And so then that way, because as I said, we want to keep it where our providers don't get in trouble, but at the same time, where our families are knowledgeable of what's going on.
Right, exactly, thank you.
And and this may be beyond our scope of work, but it's an opportunity when there are some centers, and Flo may deal with it more than others on the staff, that don't have the capacity, I don't want to say have the capacity, may not be as astute in reconciling their accounts. And so if there are calls and concerns about money coming in, does that come directly to you first, or does that go to Flo when they have concerns about payments? If they're reconciling their accounts, it goes to Britt?
Goes to Hector.
Hector, okay.
Now, sometimes it may come through.
Yeah, I would
and
say
then
we may field it. I mean, ultimately, it's your money that's paid out. So to make sure that the closing the loop, the last step is through CPP. So we may route a call to Hector, but unless they have his personal line, they might call him but more often than not, they call us and they refer it.
So when you think about it, some of the barriers though is that people haven't turned their forms in about the automatic deposits and things of that nature because they're not using that form of payment. So do we see it as a way to really kind of break down some of the barriers and kind of give them a sense of comfort that here's what you can expect as it relates to you upgrading your system or having a support that if you have questions about a new system that you're not used to using, here's how we can interact with you as well. So that's where I'm going with that.
You're talking about the providers.
I'm talking about the providers, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the providers.
So do you mean when we're
There are
onboarding a
number of
provider,
providers.
do we show them, like, we're gonna give you this report every month and this should help you, kind of
A
thing?
way, and I guess this would come through QI as a way to encourage them to participate. A lot of them are holding back because of systems, a fear of systems, and what you're presenting is a system. And so as a reassurance, when it comes to calculating money or bank accounts, the trust factor is that you're not peeking into their bank accounts, but you're at least giving them a way that they're gonna be able to do their money differently. So that's all I'm saying. That make sense?
Yeah, Brittany.
Kinda. So he's talking about tuition assistance. I totally understand your question in terms of getting providers on board, but they're missing some of this finance documentation because they do not understand the systems. When we reach out to them, asking for those documents, we do explain to them the purpose. And usually when that's done, they're like, oh, okay, sure, I'll get that right to you. So it does happen for quality improvement applicants. Can't say it happens for tuition assistants. I think they fully understand that they're going to be reimbursed for students. But in terms of QI, there are cases where we need those finance documents to reimburse them for substitute teachers and things of that nature.
I was just looking at this report, that's where I got my question from. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's all I had to you. Again, you have the reports, a monthly report that's standard every month. My contact information is on the front. If you have any additional questions, by all means, feel free to email me directly. As you probably got a feel here, I might have to route that a different way, but I'm happy to field the question. Thank you all. It's a great organization. We're excited to support you all. And just let me know if you have any additional questions.
I'd like to make a comment about what the relationship is and what some of the challenges are. The first month, the end of the first month that I was there, I got the first of the monthly reports that we as board members hadn't really seen because they're directed to staff. And I was overwhelmed by the potential to ask questions and get questions answered, think about our processes and everything. Some of the questions you asked, are you able to see who's running out of publicly funded childcare? Are you able to do a variety of things? And I think, oh my gosh, if we had the resources to really look at that data and use it for all kinds of understanding better of the parents and providers, digging into it, but it's because it's so much information. So what we have right now, certainly Flo and Brittany use it on a regular basis as a part of their work, targeting where they should put their efforts, and it's a great resource. Lauren is, as all of you I think know, is going to be leaving us in a couple of weeks, but I pop out of my office about 2 or 3 times a day saying, can you find this out? Can you find that out? And she can really move around that data in all sorts of ways. We also can call metrics and ask for things, which we're going to have to resort to after I can't pop out of my office and ask you questions. But when the public, when our board, when our staff have a question, there is a lot that is there already and we can go to. So I just wanted to mention that all kinds of things we can find that we're already collecting. It's just we don't go to it, pore over it, study it until we have a need or a question. That's sort of our status with it. A trove of information that we have the potential to tap into, even more than we are.
Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Bob. Sally, do you want to give us some background on the presentation that we will have from Ohio State?
Yes, so Kelly is Columbus, so we have our traveling troupe today from Denver and Columbus. We are 2 years into the program, and the Crane Center at Ohio State University has been our evaluator. As you all know, we're just finishing the end of the second year, and so much of the data is still coming in, surveys, a variety of things. We never had what I would consider at least that I can fully recall, a presentation on our year one data. What did we get? What did we find? And so we've asked Kelly to come today. There may be bits of year two thrown in there, but to really come and share with us what they have learned and to present largely a year one report for us. The piece that will not be in front of you today is the detail that we're getting on the kindergarten readiness assessment for the children who are in the program in year one. We're partnering with Innovations at Cincinnati Children's Hospital that has access to more data and more varieties of that data and comparison data to do that piece of work with us in partnership with Success by Six and Cincinnati Public Schools. So that's for a later meeting. I wanted to mention that this will not pretty much involve KRA data. I don't know, Kelly, if you want to, if you need the microphone wherever, can you catch her at the microphone? Okay, wherever you're, either the podium or there, wherever you're most comfortable.
Maybe like right here so I can see people. I just want a second to comment about the weather. I can't tell you how many times I've driven down 71 in snow or rain to get here. It was really nice to have a pretty drive to come see you all today. And to echo what Sally said, a lot of what we talked about with year one was more internally focused data and what we were learning that might be informative related to improving processes over time. And today the focus is a little bit more about what are some of the messages that are really coming out of the data from year one, particularly from provider and parent perspective, with a little bit of year two data as well. I'll also talk a little bit more about some of the things to expect from us in the next few months. And so just to quickly touch on this slide, the focus that my team had when prepping this presentation that kind of emerged from discussions with Lauren and Sally was on thinking about what are the barriers to access and quality and how has CPP impacted them, as well as what are the benefits that parents, teachers, and providers, both across TA, QI, and the Promise Grants are experiencing. And as Sally said, this will be mostly year one with a little bit of year two data. We have our data from parent perspectives process, so that'll be in here from year two as well. Leslie? So to get us started with tuition assistance, we can, the first thing that came across really clearly from our provider surveys was that CPP was increasing access. This is obviously known by the numbers that are traced by metrics, but from a provider perspective, this was in year one. Over a third of providers that were reporting that CPP funds were helping them enroll children that they had on a waiting list, and so they were kids that they were trying to get in, and this funding was helping them do so. They also, a large majority of providers were reporting that they were enrolling more kids because of CPP funds. Of those providers, when we asked them how many more kids were they enrolling, the average was 8. That was a pretty wide distribution. There were a number that were just doing a couple, and then some that were really enrolling quite a bit more. And so the takeaway from this really was that tuition assistance was helping providers enroll more children. And of course, these were in high quality slots because of the 3-star and above rule. CPP also increased access from a parent perspective. So over 60% of parents reported that without preschool promise funding, their child would not have been able to attend preschool. About 30% of parents said that before CPP funding, they could not get their child the kind of childcare that they wanted for them. So they were really valuing this both in terms of getting preschool, but also getting the preschool that they wanted. And so as some of these costs were covered, it really was helping parents both access preschool and access preschool that they were excited about using. As you can see in this figure, over half strongly agreed that CPP was helpful, and another third agreed with that statement. We also asked a series of questions to teachers and parents about whether or not they were perceiving changes as occurring at the tuition assistance providers. So one of the benefits of enrolling kids through CPP is that the subsidy is at this cost of quality rating, which is supposed to be providing providers with more money to make investments into their classrooms and into their centers. And so we can't say for sure that these changes were due to CPP funding, but during the time that CPP funding was coming in, almost half of teachers and over a third of parents were reporting that they were noticing changes occurring in the classrooms and in the buildings that they were in. About a quarter of teachers had new classroom materials, and there were reports of having more staff in classrooms and doing more field trips with children during the first year that these programs were receiving tuition assistance dollars. This is just showing, we wanted to really have a check on making sure that parents were happy with their preschool that they were using and their child's experience at that preschool. And the vast majority rated their child's preschool as being wonderful, good, excellent, or perfect. And so Sally and I have talked. I do totally acknowledge parents like their preschools. You're not going to send your kids somewhere that you don't like, and so this really is a kind of just a check on that, but perhaps not the most groundbreaking finding here. But I think it is important to still document.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, did we have any questions to parents who had children in preschools that were year-round and did not receive that funding during the summer?
Do we have questions to parents about it? That's a good question. We ask providers about it a lot and what they were planning to, but we do. We definitely do have, and I can go back to that data, we did ask questions to parents about their plans for summer.
Was there any objection to not having that assistance for the summer, and did they notice any decrease in the quality or change in the teachers?
We don't have any data that would get at if there was a decrease in the quality. In general, what we saw was really from the provider perspective, and that they were trying to find ways to make it work, either through trying to find ways to use the PFCC dollars or some of those things. And some of the qualitative work that our partner Crystal did really got at kind of how challenging that was for providers to do. But for the most part, what was coming through in our data was that they were finding a way to make it work. But you're right that we don't know if that was at the cost of quality or different staff-child ratio or things like that. And that
Or
was
staff leaving?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
That we don't have as much detail on.
Okay.
These are just kind of agree-disagree questions. CPP benefits me as a center director. CPP benefits my preschool-aged children. And CPP benefits my preschool center. And as you can see, the dark blue and the yellows, which are strongly agrees and agrees, dominate, and I think in particular, really dominate the questions about the center and about the students. So providers really felt that working with CPP was benefiting the children that were attending their program. So we asked a bunch of questions to teachers in the first year about their perceptions of CPP. And not surprisingly, I think they agreed that it was benefiting students, and almost half agreed that it was benefiting their center, but they were less likely to kind of see personal benefits, which in some ways makes sense. The funding is really going at the provider, but it's also a little contradictory when you think the teachers were noticing changes, but they weren't necessarily perceiving benefits. And so there's a couple of reasons that could be, right? Maybe it's not because of CPP dollars that things were changing. Maybe it's because it's not clear to them that it's CPP dollars that are changing. But thinking about teachers' roles in this overall system, I think is something that warrants further thought based on some of the information we are getting from them.
Were you able to stratify this to break it down into a 3, 4, 5-star rating?
Yeah, we could. We haven't done that.
So I wondered if, how
Yeah.
you break that down.
Yeah, that would.
Maybe if you, a 2, you go on to a 3, you may have a different opinion that this really has helped us.
Right, right. Let me make a note of that.
And then that first bullet point is 20% strongly agree.
Yeah.
The next 2 bullet points.
Are the
agree or
agreeers?
strongly.
Yeah.
Is that,
It's still under 50% when you include the agree, and I'm not sure why that's inconsistent on that slide.
okay, but you think it's closer to 50% if it was strongly and just agree?
Yeah, it's not over 50%, but it's close.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's,
So it's not
That's-
totally out of line with the other numbers.
Yeah, okay.
That's what it's
that's helpful.
The other thing that we could think about breaking this down by is how providers, I'll show on another slide how providers say they were using the extra funds, and that might make a big difference for teachers too, especially some of the providers were using this for salary and benefit things for their teachers, and so we would expect that they would be the teachers that would be more likely to really endorse this as being a beneficial program for them. So we could try to break it down by that in addition to by their star rating. And this is again just a yes, strongly agree type question. And essentially, parents were agreeing or strongly agreeing that CBP was benefiting their child. It did go down slightly in year 2. We asked this question originally because of concern that if parents were already receiving PFCC, particularly if they didn't have a copay, they may not actually be that aware of preschool promise dollars coming in and helping their children. So this was really partially getting at awareness of CPP as something that was helping their child and their family. And so we were pleased to see that that was coming through.
Was it same parent year to year or different?
So I haven't broken that out yet. It would be, year 2 is going to be a mix. So it'll be parents who are in it 2 years and it'll be new parents. But you're right, that's really, it'll be interesting to see change over time for the parents that we do capture 2 years. Yeah.
And are these parents also parents with emerging preschoolers coming out of toddler rooms into preschool classrooms with a PFCC copay? Because that is going to affect them too. And I say that because I had a parent come to me today that has a child that just moved from the toddler room to the preschool room, and she now has a copay. And she's like, is Preschool Promise going to be at the open house in August? Because she knows. Yeah, it's affecting her.
So we'll definitely know, we know where they're coming from, and I don't recall if we know if they were on PFCC in that year. I think we probably do. We asked the whole battery about where their child was in the year prior and what changes had happened. Yeah, and we do. We ask about if they were paying and things. So yeah, we would be able to get at that and see, track how their subsidy status looks over the year, and then contrast it with that and see if that's really impacting their perceptions of CBP. Yeah.
Because a lot of them didn't really get it
Yeah.
at first.
Right,
You know, and they didn't really get the benefits that would come to them.
right.
They just saw preschool promise and they didn't really know what the promise was.
Correct. Yes.
So we got into it.
So, I'm gonna switch gears and talk a little bit about QI. The QI work in year one was a lot more limited than our TA work, in part because the program really was still gaining momentum. But we did do surveys with parents and teachers and providers. And most of what I'm going to talk about is really from the provider perspective, since at that point in QI, that was really who was most involved in the QI process and most likely to really be aware of what was happening as a provider. We asked providers since the start of the year, where were they at with Step Up to Quality. This survey was done late winter, early spring of year one, and at that point in the year, 2/3 had already applied. The other third were planning on applying, but 2/3 already were already starting to apply. And they were kind of across the board in terms of what star level they were applying for. It was pretty evenly distributed between 1, just getting in the system, 3, trying to, and then there were some that were trying to jump immediately, mostly to 5 more so than 4. So there was kind of a range of what they were applying for, but at this point, 2/3 had already actually applied. Providers, largely, we had a lot of open-ended questions, and they largely gave us really positive feedback about the support that they felt like they were getting. Working with teachers and giving them feedback, giving them confidence. A lot of it was confidence both about making changes, but also largely about confidence, getting back to the systems piece, about navigating the system. They really felt like working with QI and working with their coaches was giving them the confidence that they could tackle all of this paperwork. They kind of had a series of different things that we could check off. Again, strongly agree to strongly disagree about what was helping. There definitely was more variation. There were some programs that were still kind of unsure about the benefits, in large part because the program was so new. I'm really excited to look at this data in the coming weeks for year 2. But in general, kind of across the board of different things that the QI work was targeting, over half the people that we had responses for were saying that these things were really beneficial. Figuring out Step Up to Quality, figuring out star levels, but also really making changes at the center, thinking about professional development, thinking about making improvements with their teachers and their classrooms. The items that were not endorsed at least 50% were improving communications with families, establishing community partnerships, and applying for a higher star rating than I would have on my own. And I think, at least for the first 2, we might think about those as really important things, and certainly something that plays a part in the Step Up to Quality, but perhaps not for those initial meetings when we're thinking about helping providers get to that 3 stars. But we also, you can see the quotes at the bottom, we had a lot of really positive feedback about just really understanding the system and understanding where change was needed to have success within the system. 92% of the programs have participated in various professional development or coaching. It was kind of evenly split across different things. I think this is because QI has done a nice job of really targeting what each provider needs. And this is where we really saw lots of positive feedback. We saw people really felt like our coaches were really helpful and were really there to help them and able to provide them with a perspective, like this another set of eyes and ears that were helping them to improve their quality. So switching gears, I think this is something which you haven't heard me talk about yet, in part because it's the newer piece of CPP. But one of the things that we've been working on is tracking changes that are occurring because of the Teacher Promise Grant program. And so this is just the demographics table of cohort 1, which is the first 46 teachers that were approved and are now receiving promise grants. So it was 93% female, 46% African American, 44% white, 10% other race or ethnicity. And then these are the numbers for the percentage of the sample that have various degrees. So most of the teachers had a bachelor's, but 37% had an associate's. And if you add up and do the subtraction, about 19% of the teachers did not have a college degree. So they were high school degree, potentially with a CDA. We have compared these numbers to the state, which isn't the best comparison because obviously the state and Cincinnati are pretty different, both demographically and from the teacher degree perspective. But we're serving 46% of the teachers are African American. The statewide number of teacher race is about 24% African American. We're also serving more teachers with degrees than kind of the overall teacher population in the state, but that's really only at the associate's level. So we're serving more teachers with associate's degrees than you would see statewide. We're actually serving fewer teachers with masters than you would see statewide. There's 6% of all ECE teachers statewide have masters. So this result, yeah.
So just, I was hoping you'll take it a step further. So how does that tie to outcomes? Do we know if a master's prepared teacher, their kids fare better or not? That's really the real question. If you ask me.
Yeah, so we can look at that in our data.
I would request you should.
Yeah, I can certainly look at that. I can tell you, research in general finds really mixed findings, so I think it would be really interesting to see what it means here in these programs. In general, my read of the literature is that field matters more. If your degree is in early childhood or in a child development field, that seems to be predictive more so than whether it's an associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's. But again, kind of the findings are all over the place, so I agree. I think it would be
even that 19% who
right.
are high school graduates, they may be the best teachers. We just don't know that.
No, absolutely, and I think So one of the things I'll mention at the end is in year 2, we were able to look at kids' academic and behavioral skills at the beginning and the end of the year, and so that would set up a really nice way to think then about how the teacher degree, and we have that information in this survey and in some of the other surveys we do with teachers. So yeah, we could definitely look at that.
Sally, just to clarify, the degrees of teachers, or credentialing of teachers, does it impact their star rating? Is that right or not right?
It used to be very directly tied. Now you get extra points, and you have to achieve a certain number of points. So it is one of the factors that contribute to getting a higher rating, but it is not a prerequisite for a higher rating.
So even, which I think you're right, that's data that we want. Regardless of what that data shows, though, we still have to try to work to, if you're going to work toward higher ratings, that is one of the ways that you
can add points to help you get to a higher rating. And I was going to ask Kelly if you would, because my answer was going to be similar about the research is very mixed on whether outcomes for children increase directly in relation to increased credentials. And I'm wondering if you could put your hands on a couple of those national studies,
sure.
and that might
Send them around.
inform us a little.
Yeah, I will. I can get them to you, and we can circulate. Yeah, definitely.
Well, we have to understand too, that yes, the higher the education, the more points you may get, but those points will only be valid if you have at least 50% of your staff has those same or in that range of degrees. So if you have just a person with a master's and everybody else has a CBA, it's not gonna help you.
Yeah. So this data, so that really, the data I just presented really comes from the application forms. But then what we did is essentially the process is once a teacher is approved, all their paperwork is in, Lauren sends us their information, and we send them what we call a baseline survey. So this is getting information from them prior to receiving promise grants. And we're getting this data largely so we can track changes over time. We want a good starting point to see where things were at. And we looked at kind of two main constructs. We may have talked about these last time I was here, but one of them, or in the other board meeting, but the two things we really were trying to get at is how they felt about their job, their commitment to their job stress, things like that, things that we think might matter based on how much money they're taking home, and then their economic and financial situation. We know the reason for promise grants is because of the low wage issue in this field, and so we wanted to be able to start tracking those two things over time. And this is just a snippet of what we found at baseline prior to finding promise grants. Once they've been in the program for 6 months, we'll go back to them, ask these questions again, as well as get other information about what differences this might be making for them, essentially, and other things. So teachers really like their job. They feel like they're making a difference. I don't think that we're surprised by this at all. BC teachers are often very, very committed to what they're doing, but almost half say that their workload is too heavy. And I think one of the most sobering stats was that almost a quarter of teachers reported that they were looking for an additional job to supplement their income, which, knowing the salary numbers, maybe isn't surprising, but I still think that was a number that really stood out to me when processing this data. But it makes sense when you move into the economic insecurity questions that we asked. So 65% reported that they had difficulty covering their monthly bills, and 28% reported that they didn't earn enough to purchase adequate food for their families. So I think what we're seeing is, the motivation for promise grants is right on, and so we'll now be able to track and see. Hopefully we see these numbers changing over time. So just a couple
So
of...
one question on that, for you or Lauren. So two of the areas I think we want to track right are other reasons why we'd be doing this, which would be to address issues that have been raised around turnover, and then also impact on improving credentialing, because some of the grants are related to improvements there. So are we tracking that separately, or how are we going to address those two issues?
So there's a couple ways. I'm glad you brought that up. So some of that wasn't in our baseline survey because it was in the initial application form, but that will now be a part of our tracking survey, particularly things related to credentialing and involvement in professional development. Turnover will be captured. Well, we'll get it from teachers as we go back to them, but we're trying to capture that at a provider level. And so we'll get that in our provider surveys.
Do we have a baseline for that, right?
We do. It's not, basically every year that we've done a provider survey, we've asked about turnover questions, and so we'll be able to look at that here.
Great.
And say,
That's great. Thank you.
What's your participation rate, on some of these? You getting everybody to respond, or you?
No, I wish. So it varies quite a bit depending on which survey this is. So for these surveys, there were 46 initial, and we had about 40 responses. So we, there were 46 teachers in the initial premise grants, and we got about 40 respond. And no, that is good. That is good. So with our other surveys, it varies, but we have in year 2, we have over 250 parents that we were able to get surveys from. We really try to get responses across the board to really get full coverage of the program. And I will say, part of the budget is that we do provide gift cards for when people fill out our surveys, including the parents and teachers. And so I think that's what really helps ensure that we do get responses that we think are meaningful.
Are you working or asking any questions of the Preschool Promise staff? Because I know when we get our information from Matrix, our receipt type thing for invoice, it does ask how many teachers have left, how many teachers are there, you know, how many seats you have available now. So some of that information is
there.
Capsulized there.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Lauren and I had talked about using that, and I think we wanted to make sure, I think it was Emily that we were planning some of that, making sure that that was captured at the metrics level. So yeah, so and that will be really useful because it's more fine-grained in terms of the time frame and what it's captured. So yeah, that'll be another useful piece of information for really getting a turnover in a
yeah, that way you're not waiting to the end of the year or 6 months, because that comes out every month.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. So then just a few things that we're working on. One kind of from each thing. So as you all probably recall, in year 2, as I mentioned, we were able to get assessments and information from teachers on children in both the fall and the spring. So that data is almost ready to be analyzed, so we'll be ready to be analyzed tomorrow. And that's really where we're going to be able to see our kids that are enrolled in TA making growth across the year and making growth at a rate that is appropriate for preschool and is comparable to other samples. And then starting to break that out by some of the more nuanced questions. Is that different at a 5-star versus at a 3-star? Things like that. And really start to be able to understand where are kids making the most gains and where might we want to think about providing more assistance. So the direct assessments that we used were 3 subscales of the Woodcock-Johnson, which is really good at looking at growth. That's one of the real advantages of that. And then we also do the Bracken School Readiness. With quality improvement, 2 things to talk about. So one of the things that we did this year was we really focused on trying to be at providers in quality improvement. So we did observations at 57 different programs involved in quality improvement. And what we're doing right now, and we're about to send to Brittany, is a template of how to use the information that we gathered at these observations, either for her or for her coaches to think about what are the strengths of the center and what might we want to see improvement on. And so we really focused on 3 different assessments there. We did the class assessment, which is a really commonly used assessment. We also used a measure, we tried to get at some structural things. So we didn't do a full structural measure. We kind of tried to tailor it to CPP. So we have a lot of items about availability of literacy materials at various providers. And then we worked with Brittany to think about items related to not just positive interactions, but more specific things related to teacher-child interactions, so that we can kind of have a tracking system for those. For a few programs, we'll now have this for 2 years, but we'll really just have a solid number from this year to really start looking at quality improvement and thinking about how that can be meaningfully used. And then lastly, the big thing that we've been doing is thinking about promise grants. So there's kind of two pieces here. One is the tracking of this over time. So as I said, we'll kind of track these initial questions from baseline, but I'm also really interested in hearing about other things you're really interested in knowing from these teachers, because we're still at a point where we are in that period where we don't have to get the survey out to them again for a couple months. So if there are things that you're particularly interested in, we have the flexibility to add them. But we're also really interested in getting at what are the promise grants doing to the systems level, and the way we're getting at that is through providers. And so my partner, Crystal Pender, is wrapping up the last interview with 10 providers who had a teacher from cohort 1 receiving the grant, and really trying to get at things like why did teachers in your center apply, why did some apply and not others, but also how is this shaping the way you're thinking about teacher salaries, how is it shaping the kind of what are they seeing as happening due to these promise grants, and getting their initial feedback. And so she'll have results from that probably in about a month, where we can really think about both what might help increase uptake of promise grants, but also what are some of the other things that providers are thinking about as their teachers enroll that we may not have thought about in advance. So I will end there and take more questions.
Any questions?
Are the promise grants restricted to full-time, or can any teacher apply?
Full-time teacher.
Full-time only?
Yeah, they're both.
On the slides where you have the positive, like providers took advantage of professional development, 92% did.
Yeah.
Do you know what the 8% did?
Do I know why they didn't?
Right.
No, but I could go back and try to triangulate and see if there's anything about them. I will say, I'm much more interested in that question in year 2. In year 1, some of the people that we caught in the survey had just entered, and so my guess is that it was just a timing issue, but I could go back and try to confirm that.
You mentioned the kindergarten readiness at the beginning and the separate report. And I think, right, those are the same groups that CPS works with, like children's and the other group you mentioned on this.
Yes,
data.
yes, Innovations, the
Innovations.
group from Cincinnati Children's.
So they released that in March. Is there a reason that it's taking us longer to get that data?
Their review.
Well,
Can you all answer that?
I mean, that goes through a different department when they release, and when they work with it, so.
I can talk about it a little bit, maybe, if you want. So I think we were doing work on that kind of in parallel to them doing their work for CPS. And as doing that, we really realized that there were some comparisons that they had the ability to add and to really enrich what we could learn from it. But I think it was like the parallel timelines is then why there is a slight delay on that. That's my best understanding based on the conversations.
It just seems like the data is here from CPS, so if we have the data right on who our students are, it just seems right. Are you just matching that up, or is it more complicated than that?
So it is just matching it up, and that is partially done, but it's, I think, without understanding who the CPP kids are being looked at relative to, when we were looking at the data, it didn't seem to really provide meaningful information. And that's where, through the conversations that were largely organized with Success by 6 and the CPS, it really just it felt like it made more sense to wait until we had the comparison info that Innovations is able to do before presenting it.
I think that really nails it. We kept saying compared to what? We would get information and without context for it, and the context that Crane was able to provide, we kind of felt, and this was a presentation to this board earlier, we kind of felt it wasn't apples to apples, and we didn't feel like we really knew what the data meant. And when we came to understand better that Innovations can really say, compared to what, how are our kids doing, we sort of switched to say, that's really what we need. And so that agreement was reached after I started in this position. It was arranged by Shiloh and the team, but it didn't start until much more recently.
Also, were the children that were looked at for the community providers, were they children that were in the first year, or children in the second year, or children as a whole? Because even though Cincinnati Public is 9 months, we're year round.
So we don't have the kindergarten readiness assessment data for year 2 because the kids haven't entered kindergarten. So that will be a while. We're only dealing with year 1 at this point.
So close. But in terms of the assessments, so this is the assessment schedule was spring of year 1, fall of year 2, spring of year 2. And so for kids that are in it multiple years, we even would be able to look at that summer period by looking at spring to fall and see, we could look to see was kind of the growth rate look similar there as if you would expect from the school year. So for the kids, essentially it's going to be for the kids that were in it for 2 years, we would be able to start breaking down a little bit. And I don't think there will be enough kids, but if there were, we'd be able to look at the kids who stayed in their provider over the summer versus those who didn't. I'm not sure if there'll be enough kids into those who didn't to really make that comparison, but we certainly would love to see.
Well, because the centers are year-round, you may get a group of children that would count in the count.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe more than what you expect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. Toylan, would you give us an update on the search for the permanent executive?
Sure. So our search, the executive search committee met on July 11th at Centennial with Becky Schuler, and she's here today just in case we have some additional questions. We were able to kind of establish our process and kind of figure out some strategies in which we're going to use to assess our new director. And then, so the application closed on July 19th. And we have, I want to say we have over 30 to 40, between 30 and 40 applications. Not applications, but we had, we were provided a list by Centennial of applicants and potential referrals from the board and from some of our stakeholders. And so it was over 40 names that we were able to kind of look at. Our next process is to get resumes of some of the top candidates that Centennial has had phone interviews with. And then we will get our first round of interviews. Still, hopefully, the week of August 5th is our intentions to still have our first round of interviews by the search committee, and then to have our second round very shortly after, and then extend the opportunity for the board to look at the top candidates. That's pretty much where we are.
Do I have any questions?
I'd love to hear how you're feeling about the quality of candidates you're seeing.
I personally, I'm aware of some of the people in the community that have applied, and I'm excited about some of them as far as what they could potentially add to this organization. So I think we have a nice variety of people from different backgrounds and different education levels, and so I'm excited to see our potential. So we have a lot of, it's going to be a hard decision based on some of the people who are applying, which I think is a great thing.
That's wonderful. Competitive slate is a very good thing for us. So it's great.
Well, I want to thank the members of the search committee, and again, Toylan, Terry England, Dr. Ahmad, and Christine Fisher are the members of the search committee. Keep up the good work. We'll hear from you very soon. Sally, your turn.
Yeah. Well, like I said last month when we met, man oh man, is there a lot going on. So I'm just going to identify some of the things to share. I think you all know that we have an RFP out for evaluation for the third year, and we have a selection committee with a representative from Promise Forward, CPS, and United Way. So it's a tiny starting committee to review the proposals and make a recommendation to the board. We have extensively sought input from a provider survey and a variety of interviews that we did before issuing the RFP, and will engage a lot of additional input as we really shape questions going forward. And I took lots of notes on your questions tonight to try to think about how to incorporate those things for next year. I also wanted to mention the goals task force that some of you are on, and we had a really great meeting last week or the week before to try to really zero in on what our goals should be for the coming year. You'll be glad to know that for the most part, we're continuing to do and improve the work that we're doing now. I just sent out a draft today to the committee, so we don't have feedback yet, but I'll tell you some of the things that they will be considering whether we keep and present to you. So these are like new things. One is to create a task force, really focus on summer and, well, I don't want to say summer. I want to say full day, full year. That's a different way of looking at summer. But we've talked about it since day one, but we haven't put the mental resources to saying what are the objectives there. And Terry, I took lots of notes on your questions because I know that that's of interest. I mentioned at the last meeting that we want to take a look at attendance and what we can do to drive up attendance. We have begun a discussion, I'll circle back around to this in a minute, about quality improvement coaching for 3- and 4-star programs to assist them in getting to 5s. We're going to work very closely with Vera on transition to kindergarten. If we're putting a lot of our reputation and money, so to speak, on kindergarten readiness, what are we doing in that spring and summer to help kids transition successfully to kindergarten? And we're also going to be proposing a highly robust communications and marketing plan, develop and investing in that. So those are just some of the pieces that have come up in the goals task force. I mentioned this, well, let me talk to you about some changes that we are trying to work through with CPS. One of them, and this has come up before, and I think we have agreement on it, is to raise, we've been quoting this number, which I can never remember, 84, 85, whatever the unit rate is. 8581, that we're going into the third year without an increase, and we will be putting an increase in the budget that to present to you. At the same time, something came up, and Flo actually mentioned this earlier in the meeting. The publicly funded childcare does not allow parents to pay variable rates based on different funding sources. They must make up the difference if a program is charging a certain rate. We pay 75% of that number to 3-star programs, 90% to 4-star programs, and 100% to 5-star programs. Somebody has to make up the difference, and it's largely our lower income families who are making up the difference between what we pay and what it costs to operate a high quality program. This is something that made sense during the master agreement discussion time, that if you pay for the level of quality, or if you pay more for higher rates, people will work to get higher quality, but we didn't really anticipate the unintended consequences and equity issues around paying 3- and 4-star providers not enough to get to 5 stars. So we're working with CPS on this. I've talked to Vera, of course, a lot about it, with Superintendent Mitchell and with Jen Wagner, and we're going to take this proposal to the Finance Committee of the CPS and our Finance Committee over the next couple of weeks to address that issue. So then the question inevitably comes up, so what's going to motivate somebody to get to 5 stars? And we've had a number of in-house discussions. One of them is, well, we said quality was 3 to 5 stars, so we could just say that. But in fact, the 3 and 4 star programs, the minute they switch over from quality improvement to 3 stars, we say, see you later as far as support. And these are really programs that could benefit from the transition, from keeping going. And so we're going to be running some numbers, taking a look at what happens to programs when they get to be 3 and 4 stars, and seeing if instead of decreasing the money, we can increase the support for them to improve. So those are some of the kind of systems changes. We're working hand in hand with CPS on each of these to try to make those kinds of changes.
So, Sally, to
Yeah.
clarify, so are you saying those 3, 4, and 5 star centers all have the same tuition amount? Like, what they charge is the same?
That's a question we need to look into, but it largely is. See, almost all of them are involved with publicly funded childcare that ends up, they set a rate, and I'm guessing, Flo, you may be able to help me here.
I'm waiting for Amy.
Okay, okay.
So no, they all have different rates based on the store quality they have, because with the state, every store you get paid 5% more. So take one of my biggest centers that I kind of have an issue, not necessarily an issue, but just a concern with gambling and beer. They're a 3-star center. We pay for 6.5 hours a day. Hector helped me out, which is $6-something a month for 3-star center. Well, it's around $600 and something a month. Their tuition is $700 and something a month. And so that leaves the parent to have to bring in $100 and something. Now, for the families that are 200 and less, what we said is that once CPP start picking up the tuition, they could no longer charge the families. The concern and the issue became this year, they cannot charge us less than what they charge the state. And so as we moved up in tier for these families that have became 200 to 250, 250 to 300, that is a major concern, because we're really only paying them 75% to 50%. But my biggest concern for me becomes the families that are 200 and less. They don't have that additional money to make up. And so I went through that a lot last year with centers, even to the point of, let's say, the YMCA. They have, I'm sorry, my brain is splitting me. They have an administration fee or an application fee where we had to call and say, listen, for CCP parents, we're gonna have to waive it or do something. And Emily can even, sorry to put me in Emily, but she can kind of, because she knows what I went through with the centers, Delta Christian. We don't pay them enough because they, and I don't want to say we don't pay them enough, we pay them enough for what the number was, but they're charging for 8 hours a day. There's no center that's gonna say, here's the breakdown of 6.5 hours, because they're still left with hours in which they could cover children, but not enough time for them to bring a child in and get that full amount. Ms. Sarah, you can even elaborate on this some as well.
I do want to add something to you. We were looking at some of these numbers today. The majority of first of all, 2/3 of the providers are 5-star. A third of the providers are 3 and 4. And the majority of those, by far, are family child care providers. So the rate issue is a little complicated, but in terms of do 3 stars charge differently than 5 stars, but we're gonna look at it and be able to answer that question.
The 75% of what we pay, again, 75%
of the 80, well, we're last dollar in.
Right.
So that impacts it, but if somebody were eligible because of income and star rating for the full amount, it would be the 85.
Right.
81.
Because I thought part of the reason,
Can't believe it.
and I think we're all saying the same thing, but part of the reason for that structure was the idea that the tuition tended to be lower at 3 than at 4 than at 5, right? That the cost of quality and those levels were different, so you're paying less, not necessarily to motivate, maybe to motivate them to move up too, but also because it was just the cost of those programs were lower, like at a 3-star than a 5-star. But we're not saying, I mean,
when you think that they're mostly family child care providers, it's the concept doesn't really apply quite the same way.
But we're not saying like we would be paying more than, so we're not, so I guess I'm trying to understand, so like a 5-star charges the 80, what's our top number, 85, 81, right? And a 4-star charges less than that. You're just saying we're gonna potentially go, like what we're paying now might not match up to the 7,900 that they're charging, and you're trying to address that gap.
It's charges versus reimbursement, I think that's what, so it's not what they may charge they may charge 10,000, but we're only reimbursing up to 84.51. That's the issue. So it's cost versus our reimbursement rate.
And there's so many apples and oranges here, because that is for a 6.5-hour day.
Right.
And there's still a gap there, Carrie, because with the state reimbursement, we haven't had a raise. These providers have not had a raise in over 12 years.
Right.
So if you're looking at it and you're charging, say, for a preschooler $220 a week, break that down.
Right.
Would you work for that?
Right.
You know? No, go on. Because I might have another answer to that question.
I also think the misnomer, we started out looking at, or assuming that the cost of quality for a 5-star was higher than the cost of quality for a 4 and a 3-star. And I think we might need to revisit that, because the cost to get to quality for a 3-star is higher, because you're almost, so when we look at equity and flipping it, it always, though that's what we agreed on, it always made sense in my mind that we would have flipped it, the 100 for 7, the 100 for the 3-star, and the 70 for the, because they already have more qualified teachers. They already have, there are many of the folks who we grandfathered in at 5-star already had a head start, right? And I think we didn't really take that into consideration, that the struggle would be so great to get from the 1 to 3 or the 2 to 3, or even maintain the 3 when you got there. The other, and I just want to make sure I don't forget to say this, because when Sally was saying something about the conversations with the district and what you guys are talking about, and then when Crane was presenting in terms of the apples and oranges, one thing is the case as well, is that the teachers at the district are more highly qualified than teachers at the child care centers. And one of the things we talked about, I'm trying to think about if we can lower the cost of quality by now collaborating with the district on professional development. Because they had always said that they would include these teachers in professional development or develop whatever we needed. And so a way to level that playing field in terms of all teachers having the same level of professional, otherwise you're gonna be comparing apples to oranges all the time because of their very robust professional development plan. So you might wanna look at what are those plans and where can we collaborate more with the district to give access to teachers in the CPP world.
I think that's a great point, and in fact, we talked about it yesterday, that very thing in our meeting yesterday, a little bit more about professional development and some changes that are happening in the district and how we might partner on that a little bit better.
I know that Laura has done some training, for all of the community providers, and it was at no cost. Right. And that was a big deal. 4Cs has a wonderful training, especially for the cohort for the providers, but we have to make sure that when those trainings are done, it's at a time that the community providers can get there. So it may be on a Saturday, or it may be, after hours, but we gotta make sure that that is a level playing field as well.
And we have expanded within our district, so now we have trainers, and I spoke with Sally about this week. We have trainers for crisis prevention intervention. We have trained the trainers now. So we want to offer things that would not be at cost, whether you're a CPS or a provider.
Could those trainers come to the community provider?
That's what we had discussed think Brittany
Right.
here with us right now. We had met with Brittany and earlier in the year, and we were saying, you know, if we need to open our buildings are available, maintenance is there till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. So maybe we just utilize some of our facilities that would be no cost. Or Saturdays, you know, we could move to different parts of the city. You know,
Well,
what would be
you know,
best
maintaining a
for group.
cohort is what and making sure that these providers who work together
We could
can come to a common center.
Yes.
You know, because they may feel more comfortable like that, and then they can see what those centers look like and just kind of take.
We're
ideas.
open and we
Sure.
will support,
Right.
you know, any way we can.
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple of just update things. I think we reported before, we have, Flo is like full steam ahead on enrolling kids. We have 2 PT members that are very actively working in the community and a third bilingual PT member who's coming on in August. Brittany is working really hard on you saw like missing documents and things, and particularly around the insurance in partnership with Hector. We're trying to just get every single document in and figure out where the gaps are and really supporting the providers. I was gonna say dogging the providers to get them in, but we're gonna support the providers to really reduce in the queue list. And then we're gonna have to do some analysis. We have over 110 providers. We're gonna try to get a lot more in. But at some point, we really have to say, of this large group of providers, are these providers likely within a reasonable period of time to be able to get to 3, 4, and 5 star? So far, we've said, come one, come all. I think a project for the future is to really do some deeper assessment to set priorities among those who can get to 3 stars within a reasonable period of time and support. So that's down the road, but something we're talking about.
Could part of that support be from mentors as well?
Yes. That's part of the current, but are you talking about for those who are
To try to get them
not?
from 3 to 5 stars.
Oh,
4 to
that,
5
for 3 to
stars.
5, that certainly is an interesting and could be a valuable approach
For
those
those,
who have done it.
those providers who have done it.
Yeah. So those are some of the things. If you dig a little deeper, you'll find lots and lots of more things, and the team is working really hard.
Where are we on the insurance and playground? Has that all been resolved?
The
What would you
playground
do?
equipment is flowing. The insurance is also flowing. We have made payments. We
I'm
have
getting
not.
motion sickness now.
We still have some obstacles to get all the people who are interested into the program, and we're trying to really get at the root of that. But the program is definitely off and running. Is that a fair way, Brittany and Hector, to say we're digging in and working on moving those?
One at a time, every week, tackle every problem on every provider, and then we're knocking them down. So
Let's say for
this week
playground
we
equipment.
have probably paid 3 of the 13 that were on the list. And I probably have another 3 that could be paid by the end of the week. It's just every issue, every provider has a different issue.
What is the average cost? What is the average cost for the playground equipment? What is the average amount a center would need? What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Roughly 15,000.
15,000 per center?
Depending on the size of the playground and the number of children that are using it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Sally. Observers, Greg, how you doing?
I don't
You have any comments? Vera?
I'm just excited that we're digging deeper and moving forward.
Well,
It's a beautiful place.
we've come to the point where it's time to adjourn unless you'd like to stay 20 more minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
We haven't examined.
I motion.
Laura?
I'll second more.
On a motion made by Laura and seconded by Micah, all in favor of adjournment? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Thank you.
See you.
I was looking at that.